So you uploaded your activity, and hopefully in that activity you were able to identify the nature, scope and impact of the problem. And with that, you had a clear understanding of the problem. Once we've got that clear understanding, we should be better prepared and ready to solve the problem and make decisions effectively. And basically, there are 4 key steps to problem solving, and we'll look at these and then we can look at how they're incorporated into some recognized techniques that we're going to look at afterwards. And the first one is defining the problem. Now we have an understanding, we can gather data and do some analysis on the problem, and from that, step 2, we can generate some alternatives. This takes some creativity, and we'll be looking here at all options and nothing should be off the table. And that'll lead into 3rd, when we can evaluate and select the alternatives. We can look at those decisions we made and decide on the best option, and choose the option that we want to implement, and then we'll be able to have something to look back and justify it on. So at that point we're justifying why we're choosing this alternative or this option. And then 4, we'll be implementing the solution. So it's like project management and planning, and deciding on who and doing what. So the 4 basic steps of the problem solving process, and as we've gone through that, we've had to make decisions at different points. Decisions on defining what the nature of the problem was, decisions about which alternatives to use, and decisions probably in the project management side of implementing on who will do what, when and how, and what will be the most effective. Another decision we're probably going to have to make is what sort of appropriate techniques for problem solving and decision making we're going to use, because some of them won't fit with certain situations. We'll have to consider the team we've got, the experience we've got, what type of problem it is, the impact it's going to have, and also we'll have to think about things like the organisational or team culture. For example, as we've talked about cultures before, if it's a very power-based culture, then expecting employees to take on a sort of problem solving team of continuous improvement may not be the most suitable, or if we're going to use it, we may need to sort of change the culture or have a lot of support in practice. Right then, let's consider some of the recognized problem solving techniques that are out there. We can use these, we can, as they are, we can adapt them, because they're not rules, they're just a set of principles that someone's come up with about how to solve problems based around the 4 basic steps we talked about before. We can adapt them to our situation, but to adapt them and use them, we need to be aware of them and understand them. So we're going to look at 4 briefly, and then you can do some further research or look at some others that are out there. But the 4 we're going to look at are the problem solving cycles and PDCA, the 8 Ds, the focus model, and the problem definition process. So we'll start by looking at problem solving cycles. The problem solving cycle is probably the simplest and most general one of them all, sometimes also referred to as the PDCA wheel or the Deming wheel. There are many different varieties of it, but the basic principle of it is plan, so what are we going to do, so do it, check it, evaluate it, and then act, implement it or set it in stone. And they're the basic principles of it. It's been expanded many times, and there is expanded into an 8-step cycle. And the 8 steps start with select. So that's select a theme, a problem or an improvement. So what you're going to do, then plan a schedule for going about it, for solving or improving. Then grasp the current situation. So not doing this is quite often a common fault. We need to know exactly what the situation is now, and then establish a target or goal confirmed from the current situation. Analyze the cause and identify the actions to correct or mitigate it. So maybe brainstorming or mapping the process. And then 6, implementing that corrective action or plan. 7, evaluating or reviewing the results, and then 8, standardizing that approach, following it up, embedding it and putting it into action, so that we can then look at it again, and then the cycle just revolves again. So a very simple process which sort of pops up in most of the other problem solving techniques, and you can see how with those arrows it maps to the process. We're going to look at is the 8D format. and that stands for the 8-disciplined approach, reportedly developed by the Ford Motor Company, so sort of manufacturing, much more complex in detail, but still loosely based on the PDCA wheel. Automotive industry, known for continuous improvement. We've got Nissan, Toyota have got their own sort of methods, and they're renowned for it, and it's a continuous improvement approach. And it starts with a base where we have to have a plan for solving or defining any prerequisites. So setting out what we want to do and how we want to go about it. As the title indicates, there are 8 disciplines or 8 key steps. They call them disciplines because they talk about embedding them into everything the organisation does. So they start with use of a team, establishing a team that have got the information, the skills and the experience needed to solve the problems. They then talk about defining the problem. We've talked about it already, the nature, the scope and the impact, but they go further with the 5 W's and the 2 H's. So who, what, where, when and why, so the 5 W's, and then the 2 H's are what happened and how did it happen, or how many happened, so that we've got those sort of questions and we can define the problem. You then go on to developing an interim containment plan. We're talking here about manufacturing, so if something's going wrong in the process and we're producing something incorrectly, the first thing we want to do is stop it happening, because we don't want to be building more products with that problem. So we need to put a plan in place to stop it and contain the problem. Contain the problem and stop it continuing to happen, we can start to use everything that we've got when we were doing the defining to start and identify or verify the root cause. So what is actually causing the problem to occur? From that we can choose and verify some corrections. So from that we can decide or select, test some options and things we could do to stop it, and then step 6, we can implement and validate those corrections. By that we're meaning choose the right option, put it in practice, and then check that it is having the desired effect. From that 7, we can take preventative measures, so we can modify it, tweak it if it wasn't completely working, and ensure that it is integrated into the process, the team and the organisation. There's no problem solving it in isolation, so it needs to be embedded and everybody needs to take it on board. And then step 8 is congratulate the team on their success or the organisation. And it may seem a minor point, but it's about embedding it, making sure everyone's aware of it and celebrating the fact that we've solved it, which is another discipline that they say we should get into the fact. So celebrating the fact. It's a longer process for longer term issues, and often for things that have got a high impact. That's why we have to have a containment plan quite quickly. And in some respects, getting to that containment plan is problem solving in its own way, because it's about stopping the problem happening, but it's then about coming on up with a solution. So that's the 8D approach. Next is the focus model. Again, loosely based on the PDCA model and really an improvement methodology. It guides organisations' improvement efforts and is liked by a lot of large organisations such as the NHS. It is about problem solving, but it's that positive approach about improvement rather than problem solving, and it's just a formalised process to go through. Popular for several reasons. It's very user-friendly and does not require a lot of technical or scientific knowledge or know-how. It's easy to learn and you can develop it and improve it as time goes on. It helps to keep everyone focused on the improvement effort. It's a structure that processes with processes that encourage focus, accountability, doing your assigned tasks and being part of the machine. It gets people involved in that process. It values the wisdom and experience that people have got and what they can bring, the frontline workers can bring into that sort of process. And it provides a plan and some stepped process, and large organisations, people like stepped processes that they can go through. And it doesn't mean we're just aiming for an overall goal. And it uses data and backs things up to ask questions about the problem, because they say it works. It's renowned for being a good process that works in large organisations. So what does it stand for? Well, it's focus, and really it's an acronym for FIND, which is a process of identifying the problems that, or the areas that need improving. The problems will just occur, but this has a focus on saying find the problem or find the improvement. It then goes into organise, so put together a team with the processes, the experience of the process or problems, so they have the authority and responsibility to deal with it. It then goes about clarifying the knowledge, so ensuring that the knowledge of the process is there and ensure that there is agreement on what the real issue is. It then talks about understanding the variations that can happen in the situations you're looking at, so circumstances that could arise that could cause problems. And then finally it talks about selecting a solution to test, so getting your options together, determining which solution is the best and testing them and creating that goal for improvement. So that's focus: find, organise, clarify, understand and select. And really it is a framework for continuous improvement. The final one we're going to consider is the problem definition process. And as the title suggests, it's more a general process for defining the details of the problem. It's a step-by-step process and fits into a lot of the other problem-solving processes really, or techniques. It's all about coming up with targeted questions and a hypothesis as to what has happened, what should happen, but it involves 6 key steps. And the first step is to ascertain the situation or the objective. What is it that we want? It may be an objective from senior management. It may be that we've seen some key symptoms of a problem. So like if you were a doctor, this is when the patient first comes in and you're trying to ask some questions of what is the issue? Why are you here? It's then about understanding the background. So what might have led to these symptoms? Just as the doctor would question you about, so what have you been doing? How have we got to this stage? And from that, we can isolate the problems from the symptoms. A key step: what is the root cause? We actually need to know what is wrong, not what the symptoms are that are showing. And from this, we can determine some sort of an analysis. We can outline what the actual problem is, what the cause is, so that we can start to move forward. From that, we can determine some variables. We can start thinking about what could happen, sort of options and contingencies really, and then we can decide what we could do. And at this stage, really, we're just stating what we've discovered, posing questions and hypotheses about what we could do. And at this point, that is when someone really has to make a decision. So, okay, we've defined what the problem is and we've got the options and the different types of things we could do. So now someone needs to make a decision about what we're going to do. And we're going to be looking at decision-making techniques that you could use in the next stage after we've done a short activity. So the activity is part 2 of the activity we've already started. You kept a copy, or should have kept a copy of the part 1 you did. If not, you can go and download a copy, I think, from what you've uploaded, and then add part 2. It's about looking back at the problem you identified and then considering which techniques that we've looked at you could use, or ones that you've researched yourself. What was used and was it appropriate and why? And if no recognised technique was used, what was used, what technique was used, and what recognised technique could have been used? Would it have improved it? Once you've done that and uploaded it, remember to keep a copy again, because we'll be coming back and doing part 3 later. Then follow the instructions on the screen and watch the video before we do the next part.